A Lantern, Chapter 26. That fall, after Grace went away to school, John's and Eloise's first child was born. "You'll want me to come, won't you?" Abby asked Eloise with her usual desire to be helpful. "Oh, no," Eloise said hastily, a little too hastily. "John wants me to have a trained nurse, the very best." Little hurts, little pleasures, how they made up the whole of Abby Deal's life. Eloise named the boy Wentworth, and proceeded to bring him up by the ritual of a red volume in which she held implicit and humorless faith. "It would make a dog laugh, Will," Abby said at home to that invisible comrade who was only spirit and memory. He was crying, and she ran and got the little red book and looked up something in the index, went over and picked him up, and it was nothing but a safety pin sticking him. That was the fall, too, in which Cedartown was astonished and entertained by the spectacle of Mac Deal and Emma with the two boys coming to town in one of the new automobiles. The noisy approach was borne in upon the ears of the residents some time before the machine's actual appearance, so that a welcoming committee in the form of a large delegation of the citizens was on hand to greet the proud owners. Mac and 10-year-old Stanley were on the front seat. Mac at the wheel, eyes bulging and elbows out at right angles, looked neither right nor left as he piloted the popping, sputtering Landcraft through the choppy seas of a rough road. Emma, in the back seat with 4-year-old Donald, was in a state of perpetual motion, caused by dividing her frantic clutches between her youthful offspring and her large flapping hat, wound round and round with many yards of veiling. Through town and to his mother's house, Mac and his new possession were followed by a cavalcade of interested, not to say envious, spectators. The crowd surrounded him when he pulled up in front of the small gate, Mac having decided that he would not try to navigate the lane road, with the eventual possibility of his inability to turn around or back out. The machine, as red as Oscar Lutz's Thrasher, was almost immodest in the exposure of its many complicated internal workings. There were wicker baskets along the side which Mac explained to inquirers were for picnic lunches. There were 100 other questions he was required to answer. Yes, he had bought the windshield and the lights extra. Thought he might just as well get everything while he was about it. Only thing he hadn't bought was a top. They cost a lot more, and anyway, it was so much harder to run the things with one on. You could get them put on later any time you wanted to. Yes, he had come the 46 miles in 3½ hours, at which almost incredible statement there was a shaking of heads and murmured, "Gosh, almost 15 miles an hour." All of the other boys and most of the men in Cedartown visited the exhibit during the day, and a large aggregation was on hand to see the departure at 4 in the afternoon, the time Mac had set for leaving, so that they could get back to Omaha before they would have to light the carbon lamps in front. The next year, Abby had 5 grandchildren instead of 4, for Mac and Emma were the parents of a girl, whom they called Catherine. There was considerable rejoicing in all branches of the family, for this was the first girl among the 5 small cousins. Emma was back at her social activities soon after the baby's advent, much to Abby's uneasiness. "Emma certainly takes her duties lightly," Abby would say to Margaret, who was her confidant and all the daughter-in-law gossip. "She and Eloise ought to be shaken up in a hat. Emma is too easy about it all for any use, and Eloise makes such hard work of it that it's painful to see her." Near the close of her university course, Grace came home one Friday evening, ate supper with her mother, and wiped the dishes for her, remarking quite casually, "Mother, Wilbur Johnson, the engineering student I told you about, asked me to marry him." Abby, who was cutting bacon in readiness for breakfast, nearly cut a finger in her surprise and excitement. "Why, Grace, and you've kept it for Mother 2 hours, you rascal!" "Well, he's a nice boy, I'm sure. I knew his father and mother years ago, and better people never lived. She came as a bride to the half-section across the creek from us, where Fritz Reinmuller lives now. She could hardly help but have a fine son. Well, well, my baby. I can't think, Grace, that you're 20 and old enough to know your own mind. How soon the years go by. It's the right way, though, and the natural one. I'll be glad to see you." "Goodness, Mother, stop and listen. I'm not going to marry him." "You're not?" Why, of course not. I didn't say so. I just said he asked me to. I wouldn't think of it. Then you don't love him? Of course not. That is a joke on me, going on that way. He's such a nice boy, and his folks are so nice and well fixed. I guess I never gave it a thought but that you meant you wanted to marry him. Well, I don't. I don't feel a bit like it. That's all right, dearie. I know just how you feel. He isn't the one, is he? But you just wait. There will be someone, and then you can wear the pearls I've been keeping all this time for one of my girls to wear. I'm glad you know your own mind. Lots of girls don't. They just marry the first man that asks them. But you're a strong character, Grace, and I'm glad of it. One of these days, the right one will come along. I've got a little poem in my scrapbook that says, "Asleep, awake, by night or day, the friends I seek are seeking me. No wind can drive my bark astray, no change in the tide of destiny. The stars come nightly to the skies, the tidal waves unto the sea. Nor time nor space nor deep nor high can keep my own away from me." You just think of it that way, and one of these days you'll meet the right man. Grace seemed a little impatient. "Oh, Mother, I don't know that I want to." "Want to what, Grace?" "Ever marry." "Oh, yes, you do. Just now, after this little affair, you don't think so. But you will, Grace. You just wait." In 1909, Grace graduated from the university with Phi Beta Kappa honors, secured a good high school position farther out in the state, and was not home until the annual Christmas reunion. When she came home, she seemed to have developed a maternal attitude toward her mother, which was paradoxically pleasing and irritating to Abby. She was pleased that Grace was thoughtful and considerate of her, irritated that she began to think of her as old. "Mother, you ought to take a nap every afternoon," Grace would say didactically. To which Abby would retort, "I'm not exactly feeble yet, Grace." Or, "Mother, there's a splendid new book on avoiding old age. You ought to read it." "I'm only 62, Grace, and I don't see any signs of senility. You can't avoid old age, but you don't need to think about it." A week after she came home, at the close of her spring term, Grace went away to summer school. There was not a lazy bone in Grace's body, Abby often said. She was energetic, efficient. Sometimes watching her or thinking about her in the way Abby was always watching or thinking about the children, she wondered if Grace was not just a bit hard, just a trifle unsympathetic. She seemed to have no patience with inefficiency, no time for anyone who was not succeeding. Abby was ashamed of herself that she did not get more comfort and companionship out of Grace. She loved her with her whole being, but they seemed to antagonize each other at times. She sometimes admitted reluctantly to herself that Grace was not the daughter which she had dreamed she would be. A daughter to sit and talk, a companion with whom to hold long discussions. She was too energetic to sit quietly anywhere, and whenever the two held any discussions, they usually ended in Abby having her feelings hurt. Grace was always impatient with the old order of things, always so sure of herself, so certain that one could accomplish in this world whatever the task he set himself to do. Her conversation was always dotted with the words progress, efficiency, ideals. She spoke of everything in generalities: citizenship, economics, causes, rights. Abby was all for the individual. "Yes, but old Mrs. Newsom, Grace. How about her?" She could not think of people in masses. A great sympathy would surge up in her heart for the one whom life had used harshly. But when she would express herself, she would be met with a flood of information from Grace, a flat statement of statistics, before which she would be compelled to retire ignominiously. "Why, I'm glad she's that way," Abby would say to herself. "She's smart, Grace is. And she's only 22. When you get older, you get more sympathetic with the underdog. When you grow out of your youthful years, you have more charity for folks who haven't succeeded." It was so characteristic of Abby, charity that vaunteth not itself and its kind, that she could not see how others would ever leave it out of their makeup. In the last of the summer, Grace was home again, having made several credits toward her master's degree. She was energetic even in the heat, ready to help with the work, full of plans for improving the house. "Dear, dear," Abby said to herself, "Grace is so energetic. She's like the wind, so active that she's tiresome. It was during these weeks of activity that Grace decided to have an afternoon party for her mother. Some friends out from Cedartown, and 2 or 3 from Lincoln, women whom Abby had met and enjoyed at Margaret's and at Sarah Lutz's. Abby was pleased with the idea. It was kind of Grace to do this for her. I suppose I would never get around to do it, Abby admitted to herself. That's one thing about Grace. She does get things accomplished. Abby made out her list, and Grace looked it over preparatory to inviting the guests. Mother, you're not going to have Christine Reinmuller. Oh, yes, I am, Grace. Abby was sure of herself. Not with the Lincoln women. I wouldn't care if it were just the Cedartown people, but not with those Lincoln women, and especially not with Mrs. Wentworth. What would she think of Christine? I'm sure, Grace, I can't help what Eloise's mother would think of her. I don't see how you can be so friendly with Christine anyway. She's so Dutchy and so narrow and so ignorant. Abby Deal set her mouth to keep it from trembling. Loyalty. It was the very fiber of her. In that swift flight of memory with which the human mind can make a non-stop journey across the years, she heard, "Hold tight! Get the ground up! You die already yet! Dunar, ja! You like that dying, maybe?" She opened her eyes to the odor of steam, onions, hot water, flannels, to the sight of the homely red face of Christine by her bed, nodding, jerking up, nodding. "Why, Grace!" Because she was so thoroughly agitated, she said it mildly. "Why, Grace, she saved our lives, yours and mine." "I realize it, Mother. I've heard all about that 100 times. But heaven, is the debt never paid?" To keep herself cool and poised, and her lips from trembling, Abby rose and started into the next room. In the doorway she turned. "Never," said Abby Deal. "Never."